So good morning, everybody. It's yet another beautiful Sabbath day, and we are joining here together from all parts of the world, it seems, these days, to discuss yet again another interesting topic. So before we continue with today's program, Peter has our reading and prayer. Go ahead, Peter. Thank you. Peter, you're muted.
Good morning to all. Our Bible reading today is from Matthew 24, verses 3 to 14. From the chapter titled The Signs of the End of the Age. I will be reading from a New International Version. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name claiming, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for this wonderful revelation. Let us pray. Holy Father, we are so thankful for the Sabbath blessings. We are also thankful for the wonderful revelations that you provided for us in the book of Revelation, namely about the healing of nations and about that you will restore in its pristine beauty all things. Father, we want to ask a special blessing upon Dr. Sigve Tonstad that is going to be with us today, and blessings upon all of us. And may we increase in knowledge about Jesus Christ, because we ask all of this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Well, today we are going to have again Dr. Sigve Tonstad with us. And the previous meetings that we have with him, he was presenting the structure of the book of Revelation and different schools of thought about the book of Revelation. Today, he was preparing basically a series of videos titled Rereading Revelation. And today we are going to see a movie in this first series titled Retrieving the Vision of Healing. Welcome to the Sabbath School, and watching this video.
Thank you very much, Peter. Can we please start with the video now?
Welcome to this series entitled Rereading the Book of Revelation. My name is Sigve Tonstad. I am a medical doctor. I have a specialty in internal medicine. I have also done a PhD in New Testament studies and have worked as a full professor of biblical interpretation at Loma University. My role there now is research professor of biblical interpretation. And we have chosen to call the series Rereading Revelation for a reason, because I cannot think of any book that is more in need of being reread or more deserving of being reread. We did this series earlier this year, and we are now doing an improved version that we hope will be improved with respect to sound quality, image, and even content, especially the content of the rereading part of it. So, lecture number 1, Retrieving the Vision of Healing. That is our first priority, and we will start reading from Revelation, from chapter 21, quite familiar verses 3 and 4. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, the dwelling place of God is among human beings. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them. And God will wipe every tear from their eyes. And death will be no more, nor grief, nor wailing, nor pain will be any more, for the former state of things has passed away." So why am I beginning with this text? Because it projects a vision of healing. And we are saying that that is the main errand of the book, to show us Revelation's vision of healing. So here, death will be no more, grief will be no more. Every tear will be wiped away. That's what this book promises to do. And for a world that is in need of healing, a vision like this should resonate, should make a difference. Here in chapter 22, verse 17, this is a chapter that I have, or a verse that has had a sort of musical quality for me ever since I was a child. Here, and the Spirit and the bride say, "Come." And let the one who hears say, "Come." And the thirsty, let him, let her come. And the one who would like to have it, let him, let her take the water of life as a gift. And here we have some images to illustrate. The water of life comes from the river of life. Now, this is the river in my home village. It's true. It is not precisely the river of life, but it is a beautiful river. And the water from the river of life is offered to the thirsty in the present. And the healing waters of of the river of life is also not just something that we are looking for in the future. It is that too, but it is also the promise of a healing vision for present need. So, to summarize or to add it up, it's like Revelation cannot get enough of it. It wants to spell it out. The vision of healing. The sea was no more. Death will be no more. Grief will be no more. Wailing will be no more. Pain will be no more. All things accursed will be no more. Night will be no more. 7 things. And the first and the last on the list, they are in some ways images not just of deficiency, but of evil. So the evil things of present reality will disappear, as symbolized by the chaotic forces of the sea and by the darkness of night that will disappear. And my image here is a world in a sort of enveloped by healing influences, as it were. So now, how to account, how to make sense of the discrepancy between Revelation's vision of healing and Revelation's reputation, because this book has a different reputation. And we have some people here, I will tell you in a minute who they are in greater detail, and just run through some questions. If we ask the novelist, the literary critic, the psychologist or psychiatrist, or the philosopher, or the Protestant reformers, or biblical scholars, with a few exceptions, or popular culture, especially popular religious culture, and especially popular religious culture in America, if we ask them their opinion of the book of Revelation, you will be surprised. This is D.H. Lawrence. He is our novelist, and those are his dates. And he is famous more for other books than for what he did on the book of Revelation. But this is what he says. His verdict is that Revelation is a repulsive work. He calls it repulsive, disgusting, beastly, hideous. And then he concludes by saying, just as inevitably as Jesus had to have a Judas Iscariot among his disciples, so did there have to be a revelation in the New Testament. The book of Revelation is the Judas of the New Testament. The book of Revelation secures betrayal in print of the Jesus of the New Testament, as it were. And that's the verdict of D.H. Lawrence. If we ask the literary critic, and Harold Bloom, who was a professor at Yale University, he has been recognized as the most famous, most influential literary critic of his time. He wrote many, many books. His verdict is that Revelation's message is a message of resentment. Resentment and not love is the teaching of the revelation of St. John the Divine. It is a book without wisdom, goodness, kindness, or affection of any kind. Perhaps it is appropriate that a celebration of the end of the world should be not only barbaric, but scarcely literate. So Revelation's vision is negative through and through, and the author is not even literate, as it were. So very negative verdict. Okay, let's do the psychiatrist. This is Carl Gustav Jung, who was almost as famous as Sigmund Freud and lived about the same time, though he lived a bit longer than Freud and was in some ways a Freudian too. So he has subjected John of Revelation to a sort of psychological assessment, as it were, and he finds in the book destructive fury, a veritable orgy of hatred, wrath, vindictiveness, and blind destructive fury that revels in fantastic images of terror, breaks out, and with blood and fire overwhelms a world which Christ had just endeavored to restore to the original state of innocence and loving communion with God. So this is a little similar to D.H. Lawrence, that Jesus has done some good things in the world, and then Revelation comes and wreaks havoc with the whole work of Jesus, and then Revelation is then a contrast to what we know of Jesus in the other books. All right, let's do the philosopher. Our philosopher will be Nietzsche. And there is much more to say about Nietzsche than his view on Revelation, and some of the things we might say about him might be good. But here is what he says. He sees Revelation as a book preaching revenge. What conversely did the Jews feel against Rome? One can surmise it from 1,000 symptoms, but it is sufficient to carry one's mind back to the Johannian Apocalypse, that most obscene of all written outbursts, which has revenge on its conscience. So the aim of Revelation is to bring a message of revenge in Nietzsche's view. Well, enough about those people. Let's do some theologians. Let's look at what the Protestant reformers will say. Let's look at the verdict of Martin Luther, who will call the Revelation a book without Christ. And here you have a depiction of Luther, and this is what he says. I miss more than one thing in this book, and it makes me consider it to be neither apostolic nor prophetic. For me, this is reason enough not to think highly of it. Christ is neither taught nor known in it. This is quite an amazing thing that Luther sees the book that way, I grant that. But that is what he says, and that will color Revelation's reputation. And then the other reformers, here is the Swiss reformer Zwingli, who was mayor of Zurich for a while. And here is the French-Swiss reformer Calvin, who was mayor in Geneva for a while. So what do they say? They say that Revelation is not even a biblical book. This is Zwingli's verdict. With the Apocalypse, we have no concern, for it is not a biblical book, even though all they seek in it serves us and not them. That is to say, it's a book that serves our view, but we don't really like it, and so on. And Calvin is, what does he do? Calvin doesn't even say anything about Revelation. He just ignores it. It's the contempt of ignoring it. Well, what does contemporary biblical scholars say? And here I will look to John Collins, who is a professor of Old Testament at Yale University currently, still teaching there, and married to a great Revelation scholar, Adela Yarbrough Collins. So he has written on apocalyptic literature and considers Revelation as a book that belongs to the apocalyptic genre. And this is what he says. What we find in Revelation is the projection into the future of what was unfulfilled in the past. Jesus did not destroy the wicked in this earthly life, but he would return with supernatural power to complete the task. So another side of Jesus, Jesus projecting characteristics quite different than the Jesus that comes with a healing message in the Gospels. And one more before we leave that and look more to popular culture. And this is a theological verdict by C.H. Dodd, who is a major theologian in the 20th century in the UK and has written on these matters. And he says that we are bound to judge that in its conception of the character of God and his attitude to man, the book of Revelation falls below the level not only of the teachings of Jesus, but of the best parts of the Old Testament. So Revelation fails the theological test, supposedly because it has a low conception of God. It's a more primitive view of God, as it were. So in popular culture, especially the popular culture, religious culture in America, we have similarities to these views and a difference. So this is the Left Behind series that has been published now some years ago, a decade or so ago. And this 16-volume series claimed to be based on the book of Revelation and had a spectacular success in the market. 60 million copies sold in America at the last time I checked. It has not been a success in Europe. It has been playing to sentiments that are much more saleable in America. And this I will quote now from volume 12 called A Glorious Appearing. This is on the return of Jesus. And again, notice that this is claims to be based on Revelation. So tens of thousands fell dead, simply dropping where they stood, their bodies ripped open, blood pooling in great masses. Tens of thousands grabbed their heads or their chests, fell to their knees, and writhed as they were invisibly sliced asunder. Their innards and entrails gushed to the desert floor, their blood pooling and rising in the unforgiving brightness of the glory of Christ. Their flesh dissolved, their eyes melted, and their tongues disintegrated. So this confirms in every way the sort of message of retribution, revenge, destruction that we have heard from Harold Bloom or D.H. Lawrence or Nietzsche. But there is a difference. These people, these readers of Revelation, actually seems to celebrate it, while the others find the work to be repulsive, while secular readers find this to be repulsive. Religious readers and religious readers in America find it to be a scene that they celebrate, they applaud it, and it sells. It has enormous or amazing market success. So we have some issues here before we get into the book. The issue is what happened to Revelation's vision of healing, and what damage has this done to Revelation's reputation. So again, and here I'm using an illustration from the Douce Apocalypse from the 13th century. You find it in the Bodleian collection in Oxford, at Oxford University. The 7 bowls of Revelation and the scene of destruction here. And the artist may actually have done a fairly good job here, but let's see. We are using it to illustrate our question again. If we ask the novelist, the literary critic, the psychologist, or the philosopher, or the Protestant reformers, or biblical scholars with a few exceptions, or popular culture, especially popular religious culture, and especially popular religious culture in America, they will say that Revelation is not a vision of healing. And the reputation of Revelation struggles under that impression because so many voices combine to say that this is not a vision of healing. And so this could be someone, and this could actually be a reflection of, to some extent, the sentiments of popular religious culture in America, that there is in that culture sentiments of resentment and revenge. And those sentiments of resentment and revenge, they are fueled, inspired to some extent by readings of Revelation. And while this view is in some circles celebrated, in other circles it is a message: stay away. Stay away from the book of Revelation, because its vision is not helpful to us. So this sets up 2 contrasts that I think are relevant as we stand on the sort of threshold of reading this book. Assessing Revelation's vision, assessing Revelation's emphasis. Should we think of it in medical terms? We do need to think about it in medical terms if we wish to have a vision of healing. The language of healing is medical language. Is that option on offer in Revelation? And I will say yes, in a big way. Or should we think of it in legal terms? More is a judicial message, which is definitely mostly the reputation of Revelation, and maybe in a way that is biasing or unhelpful to our reading. Again, should we think of Revelation in terms of retribution? That is its reputation. Or should we think of it more as revelation? Something is brought to view that actually helps us and leads us to see that the message is a message of healing after all. And here again, similar contrast. A message of healing is parachuting into our world. And it contends, though, with impressions that there is anguish in the world already and more anguish to come by the criteria of the way, or by the way some people read Revelation. So we have entrenched perceptions here, and I need to step out of the picture. I hope you can see it. This is the entrenched perception of Revelation against which we contend. Revelation as a vision of retribution rather than as a vision of healing. One more thing, just to frame issues, to frame options in the way we read this book. I take this from an article written by Gail O'Day, who was the editor of the Journal of Biblical Literature for a number of years, and is a prominent reader of the Gospel of John and of Revelation. And this is from an article she wrote in 2005. So she contrasts how Revelation is, the role of Revelation in church liturgy and in popular culture. In church liturgies, she says, we have Revelation projecting a message of glory and of triumph of God. And we have songs that draw on Revelation, crown him with many crowns, shall we gather at the river? And we have not a word of judgment to be found. So all of it is sweetness, all of it is sort of calming and hopeful and gentle. And shall we gather at the river is a song that some of us know. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows from the throne of God. That's church liturgy. But in popular culture, it's very different. The texts of praise and celebration completely disappear, and the texts of judgment and warning predominate or dominate. And popular appropriations tend to make the conflict between good and evil into a parlor game, while liturgical appropriations tend to render that conflict nearly invisible. So these contrasts are in some ways, first of all, they are great contrasts, and second of all, they don't quite get it, either here in church liturgy or the message in popular culture. So when I started thinking that I might go and do a PhD in New Testament studies, I started reading, I started working on my Greek skills and so on. And this is a little over 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, when I started to do this in earnest. I had already done a master's degree, a BA, an MA in biblical studies, but I had some things on my mind that made me think I should do more. So I thought of going to the University of St. Andrews. And one of the professors there is Richard Bauckham. He's now retired, but he was at St. Andrews. And I had read in one of his books this statement: the Apocalypse of John is a work of immense learning. astonishingly meticulous literary artistry, remarkable creative imagination, radical political critique, and profound theology. And you can remember D.H. Lawrence saying, "Oh, the author of Revelation is hardly literate." No, and here he said Bauckham credits him with astonishingly meticulous literary artistry. So this is surely a kind of rehabilitation of the book of Revelation that is a step far from what we have in D.H. Lawrence. So I came to St. Andrews very hopeful, very happy to meet these types of ideas. And yet when I arrived in St. Andrews, I was sleepless. I was sleepless in St. Andrews. I am not a good sleeper to begin with. And I had a task ahead of me, reading Revelation as a vision of healing and establishing a storyline for the book of Revelation that leads easily, almost effortlessly, to that vision of healing. So here I am in St. Andrews. It's the cradle of golfing. This is the old course in St. Andrews. I'm not a golfer, but I have run around as a jogger, run around that golf course many times. And at the far end of that golf course, there are some sand dunes and some reeds and stuff. And many times I knelt on my run in those sand dunes because I felt that my task was not easy to do. St. Andrews is also a major city in Scotland, was a major city in Scotland. It has Scotland's oldest university, and it had big church ruins from the days when St. Andrews was a major Protestant city and a site for the conflict between Catholics and Protestants. And John Knox, the Scottish reformer, preached in St. Andrews. So here you can have an overview, and there is a little feel in St. Andrews, in my view, that this is a sort of model for the New Jerusalem. It's a very cute, very, very nice place. Here I am, sleepless in St. Andrews, because most readers, including my mentor Richard Bauckham, and including just about anyone of Revelation scholars, they will say that Revelation's horizon is Roman. It is Roman imperial horizon. It is a critique of the Roman Empire. It is not, as I think, a cosmic horizon. So the Roman earthly historical perspective dominates to the exclusion, almost exclusion of the cosmic perspective. And that to me is a misreading. And how do you do that? How could I get a sort of position myself to make my project more attractive to my mentors? And my project had in some ways been incubating from my childhood, having Revelation read in our home, in my home village of Tonstad in Norway, being further enticed by the message of this book when I was in high school at a boarding school in East Norway, and not losing a sense of the importance of the subject when I was a theology student at Middle East University in Beirut, Lebanon, or when I made it to America, to Andrews University, where I finished college, or when I went to medical school in Loma University, and have the sense that a vision of healing is needed even more, or here then ending up at the University of St. Andrews, where my educational journey sort of came to an end, and a long journey it has been. Now, in support of or in pursuit of this vision of healing, he will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more, mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. So you might wonder, how did it go? My foray, my journey, what did it lead to? Well, here is what it led to. I have published some articles, and I have published my dissertation first with the title Saving God's Reputation. That is what I think Revelation is up to, no less than that. And have I shown in this presentation that there is a reputational issue with Revelation? Have I shown that there is a problem with the book's reputation and with the book's representation of God as it is perceived by readers? I certainly have. So, and is there a problem in the world of God's reputation in more general terms? There is that too. And so Revelation's errand is to save God's reputation. That should make it more interesting. And one of my mentors, he liked what I did. So after some years, I was asked to write the Revelation commentary in the Paideia New Testament commentary series that was published here in 2019. So these two books and some articles, and now this presentation to bolster our case. So what happened then? So in this tension, or this choice of roads or paths to take, should it be Roman or should it be cosmic? I think I won acceptance, at least to some extent, that the cosmic perspective of Revelation has been underprojected. And in some ways, the Roman perspective has been overprojected and in some ways has taken the book hostage, you might say. And then the options between healing here and vengeance here, I would be bolder to say that it is the vision of healing that deserves to come out ahead and not the vision of vengeance. And the same thing here. Should it be retribution as here, or is it revelation as here? And again, the perceptions that Revelation's errand is to bring a message of retribution is not well taken. So let's do a review. Now, as I will try to do for all these presentations, a summary of where we have come. So readers of Revelation must contend with and must overcome the book's reputation of resentment, revenge, and retribution. I will say that that is a misguided reading and very unfortunate. And then a Revelation in church liturgy, projecting bliss without conflict, is not an adequate remedy for the gross misapprehension of the book in popular culture and its perception of conflict without bliss. Bliss without conflict, conflict without bliss, those are not the best options. We have to do better than that. And here, one more. The rereader starts with an advantage. He or she knows that the book ends with a vision of healing. And I have now tried to give you the advantage of being a rereader by beginning at the end and showing that at the end of the book there is a vision of healing. So in some ways, you're already sort of attuned to the advantages of being a rereader. And now this one. The rereader starts with an advantage. Advantage number 2. He or she knows that the violence in the book is the work of someone other than God. Well, I am asserting that. I have not shown you the evidence for that yet. I cannot then sort of cash in on that and saying that we know that already. I am saying that once we have read and reread this book, this will be what we find. But I concede that second rereader advantage, we don't have that yet. And the same thing for my number 3 on rereader advantage, that he or she knows that before the healing of the world comes the healing of the name. That is another thing that we will see when we become good rereaders. I concede that we could not say that quite yet. And then this one, how is it that Revelation is read as though it consolidates the misperceptions of God that it is commissioned to correct. How could it go so wrong with this book that it actually is used to reinforce ideas that the book is arguing against? That is amazing. One more thing, the last one. How is it that a world in acute need of healing is at risk of missing out on the vision of healing that meets its need, the vision of healing found in the book of Revelation?
So I am ready to take raise hand. I see Dave
David, yes.
first, and
I would like to get into this, but not as the first one. Okay.
Well, you're there, Dave.
Okay. It's wonderful to go to Sabbath school and not have to worry about putting it together. That's a real joy. So thank you very much. I have a general question for Sigve, and that is first a comment, then a question. I have been struck more so this time than previously how important it is to consider that the first persons to encounter this book, this letter, probably had it read to them. And I wonder if that doesn't put some interpretation constraints on what we say about the letter. I think of the very detailed eschatological charts that have come my way and your way, and I can't imagine people sitting there hearing this read to them, resorting to such charts. And if I'm right about that, that is, if it's possible to understand the letter without a single prophetic chart, I can see you chuckling in Norway from California. If it's possible to understand the letter without a single chart, if they did, shouldn't I be able to understand it without a single prophetic chart as well? That's my question.
Oh, wow. Well, I doubt that the first readers made any prophetic charts, because they had a sense of imminence and a sense of imminence that was reinforced by the book. Yes, there was probably a sense of delay even at that time, because they may have thought that the end would come even sooner than it did, and so there is a kind of implied sense of delay in the book, but I am quite sure that it took a while before anyone started making charts, and I think they. I'm still hoping that in my lifetime we will see this book performed. I'm hoping that it will be performed in a big way in the Loma University Church, not as a seminar, but as a performance, not as someone explaining it as experts, but as the congregational performance of the book. And there will not be charts there. There will just be texts and people bringing that text alive. So you asked a very leading question, and I have to just concede to everything you put into that leading question. That understanding is within reach. Understanding of what really matters is within reach without any charts.
Thank you. There was a clinician on campus who arrived at my office about every 3 months with a brand new prophetic chart. He rolled it out across the whole floor of or almost across the whole floor of my office. very, very detailed. And he said, I want you to know this first because you're a friend of mine. I want you to know what's coming down. That's what he said. You're a friend of mine. I want you to know what's coming down. But the charts never were fulfilled. And I asked him, do you ever get discouraged? He said, oh no. I just go back to work. I know that I'll get it sometime. So people have a heavy investment in these charts.
Okay, thank you, Dave, for getting us started. Yeah, maybe a heavy investment in creating them, but certainly not in the outcome of them, it appears. If it doesn't work, just create a new one. Dana.
Thank you for allowing me to speak right after Dave, because I wanted to kind of address his question. And I'm sorry for not being present from the beginning. I remember my father preached a series of sermons about Revelation with this exact idea in mind. What can a reader that is not familiar with any of the charts, what can a stranger from the Adventist culture can understand from the book of Revelation? And it was an eye-opening idea, because Revelation embraces some metaphors that are general. People all over the chart, all over the map can understand them. Like, I will give you a new name. You have a star, that your church has a star. Your church has a light. These are ideas that we can all understand. And the beauty behind them, the beauty within them, the promise of God wiping every tears and sitting at the table with us and coming again just like a groom to pick up his bride. There is so much beauty that and so much emotion, so much love, so much promise, so much hope that I feel we are missing on that when we are stuck with the chart and only the chart. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree again that there are so many things in the text that are, immediately sort of take home ideas, and we get distanced from those things when we make it more, a kind of exposition of history. Now, I'm not saying that there is no representation of historical realities in Revelation, but we have not done well. Revelation is the most musical book in the New Testament. It is probably the most musical book in the Bible. It is symphonic. It is, big choirs, a choir that's big and no one can number it. And they are performing. It's a kind of liturgical situation. You cannot get further from Revelation's mode than you do in a Revelation seminar, where you have one person with a blackboard trying to explain this and convey a book that is so musical and so full of song and praise and also full of contrasting voices. So just I think I have some friends in the Loma Linda University church community that are actually at work seeing if we can make it, if we could perform it as a church once before the second coming.
Okay, thank you. I think before we go to Simona, I want to ask, so the idea of performing it, what revelation or what will be revealed in your mind? Is there in Revelation? What would be revealed that isn't revealed in other forms if it were performed?
The cosmic conflict message will be much clearer. Let's just take one example of that. So you have in Revelation 4, you have a scene in the heavenly council where the 4 living creatures and maybe the 24 elders, certainly the 4 living creatures in that chapter are engaged in saying, holy, 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 day and night, without ceasing. You know, this used to scare me. I thought, you know, heaven, wow, what a boring place. You know, they say holy, 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 day and night. And how, you know, why would they do that? But then you come to Revelation 13, and there is an accusing voice. There is the acclamation in chapter 4, but there is an accusation in chapter 13, a voice accusing or slandering God. So you have a conflict between 2 voices. You have a voice that speaks badly of God, that speaks and misrepresents God and slanders God, and it's the voice of mudslinging. And then you have the voice that affirms, that is praising God. So you have conflicting voices. Now, if you lay that out liturgically in church, you will see something and feel something there that you will sort of experience the stakes in this book in a way that a seminar certainly cannot do. And I have not seen even hardly anyone before I did it myself showing that the voices in Revelation, the voice of acclamation, proclamation, the voices of proclamation and acclamation that you have in chapters 4 and 5, they are existing. They are so hard at work because there is in the story a voice of accusation. And most expositions, they simply ignore that voice. They ignore the voice of accusation, and they sort of marginalize the cosmic contest over God's name, of character, and reputation. And we see then that also, as I tried to show in my presentation, that reputational damage that this book has suffered is actually due to the failure to appreciate the negative voice and the activity of the opposing side. And I am sure just one single performance like we could do in a big church, I would call it a mega church like Loma Linda, it will be worth somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 Revelation seminars. I haven't calculated it exactly, but my expectation of how that will be clarifying is huge.
Thank you. I will attend.
Yeah, you will perform. Because the terms of attendance in those days for that service is participation. You and I will be the voice of the multitude, and we will have a part. We will have a line or two in the performance.
Sounds even more enjoyable.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Simona.
Thank you. So, you know, when I listen to people talk about the revelation, I get stunned sometimes by how little people understand of the nature of God. And it seems to me that it suffers, like many other interpretations of other parts of the Bible, from the same malady, and that is that we are creating God in our own image. And so people who see God as vengeful and resentful and, you know, God of death, that's what they see. That's how they interpret it. And people who see God as a healer, God as savior, God with us in the sacrifice and life of Jesus, they see that. And so it seems that, you know, we kind of put glasses on when we read this book and interpret it through our own understanding of who God is and what he stands for.
Yeah, I think your point is very a critical point. So let's say that that's true, that we all have perceptions of God of various kinds and various qualities. And yes, we bring those perceptions to bear on all kinds of subjects, theological subjects. But the view of God that is depicted for us in Revelation is a view of God that never occurred to anyone. That God should be like that is completely counterintuitive, completely unexpected. And if I could use a textual support for that idea, it's that when you have the book that is sealed with 7 seals in Revelation 5, no one is able to open it in heaven, among the angels, on earth, among humans, and under the earth, in the netherworld. No one has what it takes to open this book, because the message this book gives us, or the message, Revelation and the books sealed with 7 seals, is a counterintuitive view of God. That so it's not like we have a few lucky ones who actually did have the right idea. No one who is present in those scenes in the heavenly council came to that session in the council with the correct idea of what would be shown. It is unexpected, and because it is so unexpected, Revelation is also a work of persuasion, you know, trying to talk us into changing our minds, about changing our view of God, as it were. So I just think it's amazing the damage that has been done to this book, and because it is so different, what it brings to our world is so different and so needed.
Okay, thank you. I see that Peter has his hand up. I'm going to propose, and Anastasia, I am going to propose that we take our break and then come back to Peter and then to Anastasia. Simona, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead us into our break.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it is now 11:31. Let's come back at 11:40, so 9 minutes. Thank you. And we are back from our break. So we have more questions for our continuing discussion. Thank you.
Okay, I have Peter and Anastasia in my queue. Peter.
Thank you, Sigve, for the presentation. Listening to different opinions that you presented with philosophers, psychiatrists, and so forth and so on, including reformers, it came to my mind an old Roman proverb, "Quod capita tot sententia." That means as many heads are, as many opinions are. And I was surprised that the whole gamut of opinions about this book, resentment, destructive fury, revenge, book without Christ, book about retribution. I mean, all this is very, very negative. I was especially surprised by Martin Luther's opinion, for which I have a great admiration, that in this book Christ is missing. No, Christ is not missing. He's present right at the beginning of the book, that the whole revelation is coming from Christ, that receive it from God the Father. David raised a very interesting problem. First of all, I want to say that I am totally in agreement with you that this book doesn't end with the vision of retribution. Is not the end of the book. The vision of the book ends with in a positive way with this vision of restoration, of healing. And as I said, in this, I'm totally in agreement with you. Now, David raised an interesting question to you that you presented. Basically, your presentation included several motives. And most of the scholars and the authors that wrote about the book, they focus on the motives, and they put aside a historical scheme of events. In my view, these people are reluctant to do this because this book of Revelation is a chiastic book. A chiasm that it's characterizing this book. The historical events are not presented in order, and that we have so many opinions about, so many interpretations about the book. And I'll stop here now.
Yeah. Well, just I'll comment on two things. I'll comment on Luther. So it's quite strange. I agree with you. Why would Luther take such a negative view of this book? He says, I can't find Christ in it. Christ is neither seen or known in it. What is it about the Christ of Revelation that offends Luther? And that is quite a mystery. Well, later in life, when Luther needed more ammunition against the Roman Catholic Church, he actually made friends with Revelation somewhat more, and in marginal comments in Luther's translation of the New Testament in later editions, there are explanations of what, historical reference for some of the symbols, that this is the Catholic Church, this is the Pope, and so on. But this is just speculation, but Revelation's main thing is not salvation. Revelation's main thing is theodicy. It's like the book of Job. It raises questions about God's conduct. And Luther doesn't like that kind of question, because he thinks that God should be absolutely sovereign. There is no legitimate question that can be raised against God's way of doing things, and God doesn't need to explain it to us. And maybe that could be a reason for why this book hits Luther in such a bad way, because that Protestant theology is not friendly to Revelation, and Adventism is very fond of Revelation. Our identity is very much tied up with the book of Revelation, and I think we have in some ways not bridged the gap, and maybe it can't be bridged between our view of what is important in theology and what Protestantism traditionally understood is concerned about. I have a view that is in some ways an unbridgeable gap, even though I will say that in the last two, 3 decades, many Protestants have engaged with Revelation and done so respectfully, for sure.
What about your opinion about the chiasm in the book?
I don't. I am not against this idea of a chiasm. I am a little bit reluctant to use those kinds of terms and those kinds of explanations because I think I am afraid I'm losing 50% of my audience when I do that. I just think that even if that is the literary convention within which this book was written and conceived, it is so different from the literary conventions today that I'm afraid I'm losing. I'm afraid that it complicates more than it explains. So I will just, instead of thinking in terms of literary structure, I will emphasize what is readily appreciable, what can be readily appreciated from the book itself. And that is that the main concern of the book is God's name. The rider on the white horse who has a name that no one knows except himself. He's the only one who knows the name. God's name is the central thing, and the name of the rider on the white horse. So the revelation is name-centered and not time-centered. And all the schools of interpretation, preterist school that most scholars belong to, historicist school that Adventists tend to identify with, the futurist school that has 90% of the market for revelation, for understanding revelation in America today. All those schools of interpretation are time-centered. They want to use revelation to solve the riddle of time, and maybe, and I'm saying that revelation is not time-centered; it is name-centered, and I am very confident that that is a discussion that I can win, or we can win. Whoever wishes to engage with me on the side of a name-centered reading of Revelation. But I'm not wishing to disparage your suggestion of a chiasm. I know many Adventist scholars who have proposed chiasms all over the place in Revelation, but I have not been an enthusiastic follower of that, because I just think it might create a cognitive stumbling block that makes revelation more the domain of an expert rather than making it the domain of anyone who can, any reader can do this and can read Revelation and do very well.
Thank you. Sigve, before we go to Anastasia, I have a follow-up question to part of what you were discussing with Peter. The great controversy of Adventism does seem to focus on the name, while at the same time, Adventism is very time-centered. Have we bridged that effectively? You talked about us being in a camp that's not focused on the name, but does Adventism have something to contribute that can show a bridge, or have we kind of are we kind of on a different track than you would like to see?
I think you have a very good question, and I would try to give you my take on it. So I think that Ellen G. White has a name-centered message, that her conception of the cosmic conflict is name-centered. And she engages somewhat in a few places with time issues, but not really all that much. So I will say that Adventist readings of Revelation, other than Ellen White, are time-centered, and Uriah Smith, time-centered, and those who have followed more recently may be somewhat less time-centered than we used to be, but that's, you know, that everyone wants to say historicism. We are historicists, we are historicists. Well, historicism is a time-centered reading of Revelation. It is not a name-centered reading. So historicism that we do as Adventists have in common with preterists and futurists, that we make time the central issue. So we might not like that we have that in common with them, but we do. So the escape valve for that, or the off-ramp for that, is to say, no, we were wrong on that. It wasn't time-centered, it was name-centered. And there is within, in the context, I mean, that John on Patmos understands himself to be telling a story that clarifies the contest over God's name. I think that is easily shown by the text itself, that John on Patmos thinks, oh, I'm a historicist. I have to tell, I'm going to tell, you know, to predict history here. I think his self-understanding is that he is a name-centered thinker who has visions on Patmos about the name of God that was revealed in so many ways here, wonderful ways in this book. And he knows the rider on the white horse who has a name that no one knows. When the game is over and the sun sets, he knows that name. It has been revealed. And that is I think we can move in that direction. I hope that we as a church will move in that direction. I hope that Revelation will succeed in the world as a book that sheds light on God's name, as it were, much more than it has, and certainly very different from the way this book has been perceived.
Okay, thank you very much. Anastasia.
Yes, thank you. And welcome again, Sigve. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Let's say for so many people that wrote so many negative things, something there that is not positive. And I loved a lot of your explanations. I'm sorry I didn't hear all of them. But I did ask last time, does the end justify the means? And again, about the nature of God. One of your mentors, Dr. Hayes, tells us that if we go from the New Testament to the Old Testament and the nature of God is not consistent, then it's not of God. So my question is, again, does the end justify the means? I don't know how you have explained undeniably, and I love it, and I thank you for it. The positive, the healing, the image of Christ, the saving, those passages that are Christ-like, absolutely they're there, and the hope and all that. Nevertheless, then it seems the means by which the end of the world will come is horrific, it's vengeful, it's retaliatory, and please tell me how you explain those, and is it God who does it, or do we do it to ourselves? And the other thing, again, about the nature of God, let's not forget, if indeed John is the one, that John who wrote the Revelation, let's not forget that he did come from a Jewish tradition. Doesn't it seem, to tell you the truth, I'd rather see the coming of Jesus on a donkey than on a white horse. White horse gives me the creeps. It reminds me of the junta. It reminds me of the Roman emperors. It reminds me of the rich versus the poor, the humble versus the autocrats. And does God need the praise? We praise him. Does the Father tell his children, you either praise me or you go to hell? And for a denomination that doesn't believe in hell, that book is full of hell. Thank you.
I'm glad you said that with a smile at the end.
I hope it's not true, and I hope it's not so, and I believe it's not so.
So in another presentation that I think we have done here, but I don't remember all of it, but I know that I have a presentation on that. I say that there are three main principles, three main commitments that one needs to make to get a handle on Revelation. The first one is to be a rereader, which is a theme for my approach to the book. The second one is to pay attention to the way Revelation uses the Old Testament. At some point in the future, I would love to make a presentation here on how to interpret the number 666 using the Old Testament, because I have figured it out now. I have an insight that is the definitive view of how to understand 666. I'm just kidding, but you know, the first one is to be a rereader. The second one is to pay attention to the Old Testament, and the third one is the one that is relevant for the question you raised, that God is not the only one who is at work in the world. So let us say that we have settled that the vision of God here is a God who is a healer. Let us also say that that God is revealed within the book of Revelation as a victim of violence, because he is the Lamb that was killed with violence. And that revelation of the Lamb killed with violence, that is the main revelation in the book. Not this event or that event, but that picture itself of God revealed in Christ as a Lamb killed with violence. And then let me just say, as a kind of contention, just as a kind of summary proposal, that all the violence in the book of Revelation is committed by someone other than God. God is a healer, but he does allow that other reality to manifest itself. That is a problem, that God permits it. But there is a difference between allowing your opponent to do something and doing it yourself. You know, so the logic of God's permissiveness is a theological challenge, but that is a different challenge than the notion that the violence that you see in the rider on the red horse, the rider on the black horse, in the seven seals, or the calamities in the trumpets, or the seven last plagues, to say that these are acts of God is a very different view than to say, as I think Revelation says, that these are the revelations of demonic activity, and God allows the bad side. He allows his opponent to show his hand, and he sees that his opponent go forward to self-destruct, to see that it ends with implosion. You know, so I have many people who know a little bit about my views who criticize me for this within Adventism, because many Adventist interpreters of Revelation, they are just as committed to assign these calamities to God as non-Adventist interpreters are. But I think that is a huge, huge mistake, and it contributes to the misperception of God that Revelation wants to correct, and it also contributes to Revelation's bad reputation as a book of violence, that people think God is behind it. You know, so can I repeat my three principles? Rereader, Old Testament background, and the most important for this particular issue, God is not the only one who is at work in the world, And if we make the right call with respect to agency, we get a different theology. The bad things that happens in the trumpet sequence, it is not God doing it. That is as plain as I can say it. So I am very grateful for the interest that this group has in this book. It's quite unusual for our Loma Linda groups to be interested in Revelation, but I'm let it start something. Let's see what can happen when we go down this road a little more.
Well, thank you, because it is very healing, and I have lived that other side of Adventism and the interpretation, and it's very destructive. So I can breathe better this morning. Nevertheless, if we as humans and in our courts today, if we were present and seeing these horrific things happen and we did not interfere, we would be as criminals and as responsible. So I think the question of God, even at the very end of so many years of suffering of many innocent people, really, because of the demonic, it's still not a God of sense. I'm sorry to say that that doesn't make sense. God, the omnipresent and the most powerful, even at the end, we let the demons, the demonic, still kill and torture innocents. But I thank you. That's very healing, and that's a huge improvement. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing that is more easy to understand, maybe, than because Revelation is so, there is such a macro structure to it and macro sense of the world. But we have the story of Cain and Abel at the beginning of the book of the Bible, in the beginning of Genesis chapter 4. And there is a conflict between two brothers. And God is aware of what Cain is about to do, because he talks to him and he says, I warn you, something bad is going to happen. But God doesn't talk to Abel. He doesn't say a word to Abel. The only thing he says about Abel is after Abel is dead. And then he says about Abel to Cain, that your brother's blood is crying out to me from the earth. So what does he do? He permits Cain to kill Abel. He makes Cain responsible for Abel's safety. He makes humans responsible for the safety of other humans. We are our brother's keeper. That is a lesson taught early in the Bible. And then he permits Cain to kill Abel. And he doesn't seem to be asleep. He seems to know exactly what is going on, because the moment after he has killed him, he asks, where is your brother? So there is awareness on God's part of this murder taking place. So what is left now for God to do to make this work? He has to make it up to Abel. He has to bring vindication for the victim. And this is how I read Revelation 6:9-12, the martyrs under the fifth seal, that they are crying out for God to do something. But what God gives them is the promise that he will make it up to the victims, rather than that he will inflict, punishment on the perpetrators. As you remember in the story of Cain, God puts a mark of protection on him. This is really crazy. He has committed a capital crime, premeditated murder. In California, you have the death penalty for stuff like that, But in God's economy, there is an attempt to limit the damage, the cycles of violence that easily happen. But the theological problem all the way through is that God permits evil things to happen, and he does not take over the responsibility we have, or even the responsibility the devil has for keeping us safe. He lets it happen, so we get to see what things are like, and then he can make it up to the victims. And he will make it up to the victims, because in Revelation it's very clear that all the victims of violence in the fifth seal, in chapter 6, he gives them a white robe and tells them to rest a little longer. And the white robe is a symbol of vindication, of restitution, of resurrection, you know. So I think Revelation can answer all these questions and give us meaningful and, in my view, persuasive answers for a view of God that is unique and that addresses our most vexing existential questions.
Then
I'm
Sigve,
sorry for giving
I'm
such a long.
sorry. So according to this kind of thinking, then, after waiting for so long for Jesus to come back and restore all those things, then the story can start again when we go back again, and the new earth and all these things. And so is he going to allow again Satan to do all this? And because of freedom, let us go through this hell again, all over again? Doesn't make sense.
But there is no, it is not necessary to say that it will happen again. It may be that it won't, but sure enough, you know, it did happen, yes.
Yeah, and the victims and the innocents suffer. I can't imagine a God like that, but I thank you, because so many, and as you said, I'll reread, and you enlightened many of those very good and positive things about the nature of God, and I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anastasia. McKinley, and then I also see Peter is back in the queue. McKinley.
Thank you, Monty. I don't know if Bob is available, but this is on behalf of Bob. This is not my question in. I wanted to get Bob's question in. The question Bob asked earlier is this: is there a central message to be found in the book of Revelation, or are there multiple messages that can be extracted by different rereaders? And can those different messages be seen as valid, or should one necessarily defer to the one central message?
I don't think one can impose on readings of Revelation one central message necessarily, because we read a book like that with different perspectives, with different needs, and we all benefit. And in our time, where you have a kind of reader responsive approaches to all kinds of literature, where we are very skeptical in our time to understand what was the author's intention. You know, how can we describe the author's intention? People today are very skeptical of that. They don't think we can. They think that once the text leaves the desk of the writer, then the writer ceases to matter, and we now have a text, and we have readers of the text, and those readers, they will create all kinds of meanings, and that will happen with whatever I say about that topic. That is likely to happen. So you cannot impose a normative reading. But I am proposing, as much as that can still be done, that John knew what he was up to. He is writing the New Testament version of the book of Job, and he makes the book of Revelation cover the same territory as the book of Job in the Old Testament: the cosmic conflict, question about God's ways, And there is a crisis in the book of Job on his part for the suffering that has befallen him. And in Revelation, there is a crisis in the heavenly council over God's conduct of God's government, as it were. And that crisis is severe. And you actually, this was very helpful to me when I was a student at Loma Linda. I was a first-year intern, I think, in medicine, in internal medicine, and I can't remember whether I was in church or not. It was on May 18 in 1980. And Graham Maxwell was preaching a sermon in University Church about the rape of the concubine in Judges 19. And in connection with that sermon, he read two statements from Ellen G. White, one from 1900, I believe, or so, and one from 1902, where she says that there was a crisis in the government of God, that the loyal angels were losing confidence in God, and that they expected God to do something other than what God seems to be doing. And that, to me, was just a moment of revelation. You know, where in the world does she get this idea from, that there was a crisis in the government of God after the flood, between the flood, Noah's flood, and the coming of Jesus? And if there is a textual reference point for Ellen G. White's contention that there was a crisis in the government of God, then that text is found in Revelation 5. I cannot see anywhere in the Bible other than Revelation 4 and 5 where you have a notion of a crisis in the government of God that makes the book of Revelation concern itself with the same things that you have in the book of Job. But so I am saying, yes, I think that is the theme. I could even try to elevate it to be the norm. But there is no one, it's not given to anyone today to propose normative readings, and I don't propose that either. I just think that the text leads us in that direction, and then all readers are welcome.
Thank you.
McKinley.
Yes,
McKinley.
Bob.
Yeah,
just a minute. Let me go back to Monty here, since he's moderating the Q question and answers. Monty, Bob wants to, I guess, introduce
I'll
here.
deal with that. Bob, so Bob, that was your question in essence. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a brief follow-up. I think the question is, it was more or less on the point, but I was trying to talk more as an artist, and I appreciate Sig's approach. So are we saying that when you're looking at this work of art, this literary work, this revelation, whoever interprets it, we all bring our own background, our own view. Are all of those views correct? How do you determine which one is correct? How do you find truth out of a Picasso or out of Revelation or out of any other type of thing like this?
Like, I can only answer in a sort of generally, because truth and not truth, you know, there are some things where I think there is something is true and something is a wrong reading of Revelation. So just to revisit a couple of things that you saw in my presentation, I think it is a mistake, that may be a strong word, but let me call it a mistake, to read the Revelation the way most critical scholars read it, as a critique primarily of the Roman Empire. I think its horizon is cosmic. It has a bigger story. So I would say that if you miss the cosmic perspective, that is a serious miss or a serious omission. And then I will say that if you read Revelation as a book of divine retribution, then you make the book give us the exact opposite message of what that book intends to do. It intends to be a book of, it wants to be a book of revelation that exposes and lays bare to us the evil of the opposing side in the conflict. So I would say a right view and a wrong view on those things. But I'm not going to interfere with the millions of readers of Revelation who read this book for and take away all kinds of emphases from it. But these are major, big category issues, and yes, 95% of readers, maybe 99% of Revelation's readers, and more than 90% of Adventist readers of Revelation assign the calamities that are described in the book to God, even though they ought to assign them to Satan. So here you have a chance to belong to the 1%. This is a 1% worth belonging to.
Thank you very much. I agree with you completely.
Okay.
I don't know why Dave Larson isn't saying something and helping me a little here, because he knows how to say it more forcefully than I can.
That was absolutely great. And I do believe in that. And you helped me very, very, very much with your interpretation. Thank you. Even one person counts.
Monty,
Yeah.
are you going to recognize me now, or you can have Dave chime in?
Well, we did earlier. So you were just stepping in for Bob. So you have a question?
That is correct. Yes. But if you want to have Dave come in before I do that.
You, and then we'll go to Peter, because we haven't heard from you personally yet.
Okay, thank you, Monty. Thank you very much. So I hope I can do this very quickly. So again, Dr. Sigve, thank you so much for sharing your life's study about the book of Revelation. I think it's one of the things that has impressed me, this long history from your childhood through high school, through college, and your graduate work. I just find that very fascinating and makes your contribution, I think, contributions highly recommended. Okay, so the worship scenes of Revelation 4 and 5 have always fascinated me. Your idea of a play for Revelation is very inviting, and I just wonder how you think that might come about. So that's the kind of a side question. I can't help but ask the question, how is it possible that the thought leaders of various persuasions failed to see the healing and the restoration message of Revelation? It's also interesting to observe that your vision of healing in Revelation links very much to Christ's vision in Matthew 4 and 23, verses 23 and 24. You remember it talks about how he went about healing and teaching and preaching and so on and so forth. How might it be possible for the Adventist church to rebalance our perspectives about Revelation with this vision of healing? It's very much consistent with what Peter read for the scripture reading.
Yeah, I think we have a big challenge here, because we have things in our legacy that emphasize healing and that emphasize God as a healer and Jesus as a tireless healing presence in the world. And then somehow it seems to me that emphasis gets muted when we get to the book of Revelation, that we suddenly have a contrast. And sure, one of the issues is that we tend to read it more as a historical prophecy than as a vision of healing. But I think, especially what has happened the last 50 years or so, in Adventist readings of Revelation beginning in the 1970s, when teachers at the theological seminary at Andrews, they gave up on reading Revelation like Uriah Smith had read it. Uriah Smith read Revelation as historical prophecy and very little else. He did not really care much about the theology of Revelation. He cared about it as history. But then the generation that took over and gave up on Uriah Smith, they put Revelation into a more evangelical, traditional evangelical paradigm, Protestant systematic theology paradigm. And the emphasis then became much stronger on retribution and so-called covenant theology, where God rewards piety and God punishes sin. And so we got interpretations of the seals and the trumpets and the bowls, where the emphasis on divine retribution is much stronger than it used to be in Uriah Smith. He actually didn't go there, but we have gone there. So you can say in some ways, Adventist readings the last 50 years have been more sophisticated than Uriah Smith, because Adventists have understood that Revelation uses the Old Testament, and much more than Uriah Smith understood it. But we have brought into our reading of this book tenets of evangelical theology that emphasizes retribution much more, and I think emphasizes it with a very glaring failure to understand the cosmic character, the two-sidedness. So here you have these great Revelation scholars, all of them, I know them, and some of them are my friends, still, or those who are still alive from that time. And I disagree with that. I think that was a wrong turn, that one took the wrong road there, and one needs to extricate Revelation from that state of being taken hostage. Let me call it Babylonian captivity, for lack of a better word.
Thank you for that. Just one other quick point here. My favorite Adventist pastor, Elder Ron Brett, who attended what's the college in England? I'm not going to remember it, but his view of the great controversy has always been that it is about God's character and God's name. So I'm happy to hear you sort of echoing and reaffirming that.
This morning is number.
Okay. Peter, thank you for waiting.
Sigve, you made a point that basically the focus of the book is not Roman, and I believe you are referring to the Roman Empire, a cosmic conflict, and I totally agree with this, because the book is talking about a conflict that started in heaven, and that is the very beginning. Then he's not placed in the Roman Empire, from started about 700 before Christ. And I have a question about from your previous presentation. You mentioned that you don't agree with the point of view that the Catholic Church is the one that was persecuting the church during 2,300 years. The book of Revelation is talking about the woman that was persecuted and retreated in the wilderness, and of course that we understand in the church. And a more personal question is, the book of Revelation is talking about a special blessing for those that are reading the book. You not only read the book, but you examine the book in detail, you study it. How did you feel about this special blessing? It will be interesting to know how you felt about this special blessing examining the book of Revelation.
Well, I have been fond of reading the Bible, not just the book of Revelation. And given the fact that the book of Revelation uses the Old Testament so much, that it uses copiously from Isaiah, it uses Ezekiel, Daniel, it uses Old Testament texts. So when one reads the book of Revelation the way I have been privileged to read it, yes, I have to read the text in Revelation, but I also have to read the Old Testament passages to which Revelation alludes. I have to read Revelation, I have to read Isaiah 11, the root of David, or the root of Jesse in Isaiah 11. I have to read all over the place in the book of Isaiah 14. So when you become a rereader of the book of Revelation, and I am sorry to say this in a way, because it becomes a huge curricular issue with respect to understanding this book. When you become a rereader of Revelation, you also become a rereader of the Old Testament. And even as well as I have thought I had done that in my commentary and in my dissertation, I didn't do it enough. I have discovered other things that I could have done better if I had, observed that. So what impact did it have on me? I will say in one way it's torturous, because it is an immersion that is quite demanding, quite consuming actually. And then of course there have been times when I have cried. There have been many times when I have wept, when I felt that I actually did understand something, and that the text or God behind the text told me, well, it's enough now, you can go. You have allowed the text to declare itself. You have allowed the text to talk itself empty. You have allowed the text to show its hand, as it were, and I am letting you go. And I have had moments, quite a few moments in my work on biblical text, where I have wept in relief and gratitude, and felt, so the blessing of the one who reads. I think, sure, I think, yes, there is such a blessing. Now, I will say that there is one more blessing waiting for us. That gets me back to the thing about performing this text. We have not yet done what the book of Revelation says that we should do. Blessed is he who reads aloud this text and takes it to heart. Blessed is that church community that does it. Blessed is the group that reads it and performs the book of Revelation. You see what I'm saying? I think Peter is seeing it, that this is not just individual blessing, it is a communal blessing. And we have read Revelation 1 verse 3 many times, but we have never done it. But we will do it in my lifetime at University Church within a year or two. That's what I'm expecting.
Thank you, Sigve, for sharing with us. Can you quickly
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you. Can you quickly say a few words about why you are against the interpretation that basically in the Adventist circles, the Catholic Church is the persecutor of the church in the prophecy, 2,300 days, church in the wilderness?
Well, that would not be the 2,300 days, because the 2,300 days begin in 457 in Adventist
That's right.
reckoning.
That's right.
That's before the Catholic Church.
That
So-
segment of the prophecy.
So any kind of entity that persecutes, any kind of entity, political and otherwise, that oppresses, they are targeted by Revelation's message, because Revelation does not believe in oppression, and it certainly doesn't believe in persecution. You know, and that is a characteristic of the opposing side, that it is murderous and killing and so on. And to the extent that Christian bodies have engaged in that, and the Catholic Church has done it, and the Protestant Church has done it. And I have just been to Rhode Island in America, because we were in Rhode Island last week. And I was in Providence, Rhode Island, where Roger Williams, who came in 1631 to America from England as one of the early Puritans, and he was persecuted by the Puritans in America, and they would have killed him if they had gotten their hands on him. He was saved by the Indians in that area that is now Rhode Island. So any entity, including the Puritans, John Winthrop and all those people in Massachusetts who believed in persecution and who were willing to take the life of a fellow believer, they are targeted by Revelation's political and spiritual critique, you know. But Adventists have overemphasized the Roman Catholic Church. We can't talk enough about it. We talk about the Pope morning, noon, and night, those who are interested in these things. But Revelation has a trans-historical interest, and it has a value-centered interest. That is to say, that believers do not coerce others. You do not change people's beliefs by coercion like they wanted to do, the Puritans in New England. And in the Revelation chapter 18, verse 24, that's an expose of Babylon. Babylon that we tend to apply to the Roman Catholic Church and maybe to fallen Protestantism. It says that in you was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all who have been killed with violence in the earth. So the blood of prophets and saints and all who have been killed by violence, that's a trans-historical view. It's not only about the Catholic Church or about the Protestants or whoever, you know, Christian bodies. It is about all the entities that have used violence to promote their cause. And the worst type of violence is the violence committed in defense of one's religion or on behalf of one's religion. And I think Revelation inculcates those kinds of values, and it's enormously applicable to our situation today, and to whether you think of America or Russia or Norway or Israel or Turkey or any country, they all get it. They all need to be readers of Revelation, as it were.
And according to this view, the beast, we cannot identify it. It's just those that persecuted the church. That's right?
Well, those who persecuted, period, those who use violence, that a value-centered reading will help us more here, because because it doesn't break. It doesn't break along the lines of Protestant or Catholic. It has. There was a time in Rwanda. Rwanda had many Adventists, and Rwanda had many Adventists that participated in the genocide. So those Adventists are also now targeted by the book of Revelation. They belong to Babylon. because they have contributed to that constellation of values that are targeted in Revelation 18, the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been killed by violence in the earth. So Adventists are not scot-free here. And I am not either, because I incline to be. I have tendencies too.
Okay,
Thank you.
Simona, we are at 12:36 according to my clock. We do have several hands. Do we want to end officially and then move into potluck?
Yes, I think that would be
Simona
Yes.
McKinley, let me recommend, I think Dave has had his mic unmuted for a while. Can we have Dave come in and then we can close and then move to potluck?
Sure, problem.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I did not really have anything to say except thank you. And that next week we'll have Bob Ford, and he will be talking to us about climate change and particularly how his own farm there has been related to that and has attracted national attention from the media. So that'll be fun. And so thank you all.
Thank you. Sigve, when it was, as I am listening to your presentations and thoughts and so on, I'm reminded of Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. And it says, I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I think you're taking a road less traveled, but so worthy of listening and contemplating and thinking about, and I thank you for that. As I read the book of Revelation and I come to that, to the end of it, there is one sentence in it that always brings tears to my eyes. And that's when John, surrounded by the sea that separates him from his friends and family and everything, the world that he knows, and keeps him alone, says there will be sea no more. And I think, how much hope is in that one sentence for him. There is no separation. There will be no separation anymore. So I'd like to end this with a short poem by Emily Dickinson called Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity they asked a crumb of me. And our blessing for this week. May you find peace in your busyness, in your journeying, in your happiness, in your suffering, in your fearfulness, in your questioning, in your faithfulness, in your worshiping. May you find peace. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. We will continue now with our digital foodless potluck.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Dave, we're happy to see